Whoa. So this is Radioland, huh? The infinite eternal, the waves through the ether fuzz roll on forever.
This is Death by DVD, and you are listening to Harry Scott Sullivan.
I'm Linnea, and I like Death by DVD. It's a statement.
And on this episode, we have a very special guest. It's a story. I guess I'm going to start the episode off with a story. The underground auteur, the king, Christopher Bickle, he was in Michigan with Pater Noster and the Mission of Light, and he saw a movie that made him think of me. And at first that terrified me, mainly for the thought that people think of me at all. But that's a story for another day. The film is a film called Sydney. It's by an artist named Jeremy Berkowitz, and Mr. Bickle went to Jeremy Berkowitz and asked, "Can I show my friend this movie?" And me being that friend, I saw it, and immediately my first reaction is I got to talk to the guy that did this movie. So here he is, the guy that did that movie. I have got Jeremy Berkowitz here in the graveyard on Death by DVD, writer, director, and star of Sydney, which, as of now, you can watch it completely for free on YouTube. Jeremy Thinks Too Much. All one word, YouTube. Find it. Jeremy, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me. I didn't want to interrupt your flow, but he didn't come to Michigan. It was actually the Festival Bizarro Land in Orlando.
Ah, fuck me. God damn it. No, that's fine. It's a great way to start the show. It lets the audience know that I'm a stupid man.
No, I mean, you were going for it, and I was like, do I tell him? You know, I didn't want to break your confidence, so I was like, I'm gonna let him go all in, and then tell him. I'll let him know after. He can edit it out if he hates the fact that I told him.
Oh no, it lets me use some Three Stooges sound effects or something there, and yuck. It'll work out fine. I'm incompetent. It's a good way to start the show off, though. And I do have some questions for you. And as I thank you for being on the show, I'd like to thank you for making Sydney. I've said this on social media. I don't think that is official or counts that much. But your movie is the first time in, I don't know, man. I can't think of something that a big budget, little budget that I've seen that really spoke to me as much as Sydney did. And it really is the truth. I finished the film and just started looking you up. I Googled your name. I felt creepy. I wanted to know more about you. I had to find you. And now you're here. And God, now I just sound creepy. I'm in your house right now.
What do you mean you're where right now?
At your house.
That's fucking crazy, man.
So to start things off, this is, I guess, a boring question, and I don't like using it, but I've gone back and studied all my other interviews, and I ask everyone the same thing. What drew you to the art life? Why did you want to become a creator or a director? What made you want to do the things that you are currently doing in your life right now?
I have actually been thinking about this a lot lately and was thinking of making a video about it, but I'll just talk about it here instead. My whole life was like, you're going to become a doctor. If you grow up in the state of Michigan, and I'm sure it's similar in other states, but in Michigan, it's like, you're either going to University of Michigan or you're going to MSU and you're going to become a doctor or a lawyer, blah, 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 blah. So that was my plan forever. I read Steve Martin's autobiography, Born Standing Up, when I was 13.
He hates these cans!
And it was the first time when I was like, whoa, this is awesome. Like, this life he lived was fucking crazy. And so I became obsessed with Steve Martin. I became obsessed with The Jerk. I decided my dream was to be on SNL. I wanted to be a comedian. And then, I mean, I'll just be straightforward. I was 15. I had a Netflix subscription for DVDs. And I had heard Gary Shandling talking to Jerry Seinfeld about this director I'd never heard of, Woody Allen. And he said there's this movie called Annie Hall where Woody breaks the fourth wall. And I didn't know what the fourth wall was. I didn't know who Woody was.
He's been depressed. All of a sudden, he can't do anything.
Why are you depressed, Alvy?
Tell Dr. Flicker. It's something he read.
Something you read, huh?
The universe is expanding.
The universe is expanding?
Well, the universe is everything, and if it's expanding, someday it will break apart, and that will be the end of everything.
What is that your business? He stopped doing his homework.
What's the point?
I didn't even really know who Gary Shandling was, but I got the DVD one Saturday night, and I was babysitting my brother, and I don't know what, it must have been Facebook. These like cool kids from school were posting that they went to like a party that night, and I was alone and I had never been to a party, and I was depressed. And I watched Annie Hall, and I was like, I felt better about being depressed and alone. And immediately I was like, I want to write movies that help people who are depressed and alone realize that it's not just them. And that was pretty much the genesis of all of it.
My initial response is nice, and I'm just that's a great reflective statement, and you still should make a video about it. I'll continuously do this throughout the show. You deserve credit for the great things that you make, and I don't think on the smaller independent levels artists get told that enough. So I try to make it my mission when I do get time to talk to artists to just let them know what they do is great. Your essays are wonderful. You have essays that I haven't watched them and gone, oh God, I have to change my way of thinking, but you've created things that have made me go, oh wow, I do really need to think about or explore something differently than what I have read or what I know, and open myself up to different forms of art. And they're educational and incredibly entertaining, which, as is Sydney, it's educational, I feel, on an emotional level, and I don't want to jump the gun and get too deep into that movie yet. At what point in your life did you decide that you didn't want to keep chasing that comedy dream? Because that's something that I feel very akin to, except I was a Belushi guy, and in turn Farley and things like that. Was there a point where you realized or thought, I'm going to do one thing or the other, or do you want to try and combine those two things?
Yeah, so even though I started to want to be a filmmaker in high school, I knew I still wanted to do stand-up. And in college, I did stand-up, I wouldn't say a bunch. I ended up winning a competition through the school, and then I got to the final round. It was me and 3 other comics. We had a 15-minute set, and I won. I got the $250. My set was, the most vulgar thing you can imagine. The French kid story that's in the movie Sydney was in this stand-up set. There was an entire sorority supporting their sorority sister, and they were not pleased with my set. But because of reasons I won't go into too deeply, I won the contest. And from there, I kept doing stand-up a bit. And then I had a friend that in the middle of nowhere, Michigan, he needed someone to open for him. It was a PTA meeting. And they needed people to do stand-up. And I was like, Joe, my set is dirty as fuck. I can't do this for a PTA meeting. He's like, it'll be fine. So we go to the PTA meeting. It's like I'm not kidding, like everyone, big trucks, camo. This is the type of place. It's cool. But, we walk in and the principal is like, just don't do anything dirtier than your grandmother would do. I have only dirty, disgusting, sexual, crazy bits, including the French kid bit. So the thing is, my grandmother was also a very vulgar person. She did a lot of it, wild things that seemingly she only told me about, and I told my family after she died. But I was like, okay, my grandmother's wild. So in front of these like 300 parents, I started doing my set. Probably only like 40 of them were listening. And in the middle of the French kid story, this one guy was just loving it. He was cracking up, but everyone else was staring at me like, what the fuck? So I told Joe, I was like, Joe, I just walked off. I was like, Joe, I can't do this. But I got paid $80, and I do stand up like once a year. I just kind of do it for fun. I like to get up there and just create chaos. I'll play with the cables. I'll move everything around. I'll walk into the crowd. I don't have a set. I just like to cause chaos. And it's just fun to do it once a year. So yeah, I guess I decided I'm not really, how am I going to build a set around this? Andy Kaufman's only Andy Kaufman. Norm Macdonald's only Norm Macdonald. I can't make an hour set off of the nonsense I do. This is not my thing, even though it's fun.
But I feel in a way you take that nonsense and you can turn it into something else. And early on to the show, we'll just go ahead and mention him because I feel it's something that will be important later on. But David Lynch is a big inspiration to you, me, and I would say, gosh, just about everybody. You tend to squint and question people really hard if they don't like something about David Lynch. I've come to experience, at least personally. for me. And David, at one point in his life, said, when you have these ideas, no matter what, you have to translate them to cinema, to a painting, to anything. So you've had this energy, this creative flow, and this need to affect people's lives, because I feel comedy is often overlooked as one of the most emotional arts, because you are affecting people's lives with you, whatever you're doing. You've brightened their day, and if you bomb and they hate you, you stand out more than even the good ones, because they'll always remember that moment. Even in like a moment of anger, if they're disgusted by what you say, it's something that has completely altered and affected their lives. And you began with this path, and now you've moved more into the film arts, because I mean, a director's a director, but I think there's more to saying you're a filmmaker than just a director. I think you're a film artist, that you clearly do more than just direct. You act, you write, you've taken on these roles and created personas. You've given life to them, which is just like creating a joke and running with that and giving it fruition and seeing if it gets laughs and follows through. Do you feel that the connection between comedy has helped you make much more serious productions? Because your films have humor to them, but I would not by any means say they're specifically comedy films.
So I just want to say I really like bombing now. It's a joy to see the look on people's faces when they are confused or upset or don't know what the fuck is going on. And so for a long time in my life, like that's how I treated things. Like I would say to people, I feel like I'm always performing. And they'd be like, what are you talking about? I'm like, I don't know, but I'm always performing. And looking back on all of it, it's like, I don't like that people can see who I am. So I would always put up this insanity around myself and these stories. People would always say, you tell all these stories. I'd create these like personas, even if people who knew me well would say, what are you talking about? And that way I could always be not understood. I was like, I so strongly didn't want to be understood. So when I made Sydney, I mean, there's a long backstory for it, but the script was kind of a comedy, and I kind of pitched it as a comedy. And I wish I could go back and change this a little bit, but I think everything worked out for the best. Whenever I would rehearse with Kevin and Callie for the podcast scenes, I never acted. Callie is a professional actress. Kevin is my friend that I always knew had it in him to be able to do this. And I was just like, I'm not going to tell them what my plan is. And I show up the first day on set as this guy, Jeremy, this complete mental breakdown lunatic. And my brother didn't tell me this till later, but Callie had said to my brother, is Jeremy okay? Because she'd never seen that side of me before, and it never explained that this is what was going to happen. Because my view on directing for myself personally is that it's the director's responsibility to create a feeling in the room, and the camera captures that feeling, and that's what the audience should feel. And since I had such a big acting role in the movie, I knew I had to direct through my performance. So the energy I was throwing at them is the energy that they would bounce back at me, and that's what would create the chaos in the circle. So it was actually the first day I could see Callie was confused what I was doing, and I did something that most directors would say you don't do because you could lose respect. But I walked up to her, I pulled her aside, and I was like, look, you're a professional. I trust you. If you have a problem with what I'm doing, say something. So the second day when we were recording the French Kid story, which is a true story and I've been telling since I was 13 years old, she stopped everything, fortunately, and said, are we doing that again? And I was like, what are you talking about? Because we did it 10 times. She's like, you are not making any sense. You sound completely insane when you're telling this story. I don't know what's going on. And then Sean, the DP, fortunately, after this conversation, pulled me aside. He's like, look at the footage, just see what's going on. And I was like, wow, this isn't just chaos. This isn't bombing. This isn't going to fail. This looks good. The room is set well. The acting's good. I need to stop being a ball of chaos, and I need to concentrate and make this work right. So yeah, Sydney started out as these comedic podcasts, and instead it became me trying to conquer the chaos I didn't understand in myself and letting everyone on set in a strange way contribute and help make that better. I kind of opened up the whole set to like an open forum. Even though I knew what I wanted, I was like, everyone here could say what they want, like PAs, everyone. And then honestly, I don't know if I'd do it again, but for this movie, it was a really great experience. So yeah, it all started with comedy, but the darkness through the comedy destroyed a lot of the comedy and made it kind of brutal sometimes.
And I'll take a moment here to poorly describe what Sydney is about for the audience that hasn't seen it, though I will be slightly snide to all of you out there in Radio Land. I hope by this point, by the time this audio episode is available for you to hear, you've sat down and watched Sydney, because I'm posting it more than anything else possible. It's not that long and it's free. It's the easiest way to support an independent artist. Money is so hard. Time is awful. The world is just in complete and total chaos. But by spending an hour of your life watching this and just clicking that little thumbs up like, even if you have to sign in and create a YouTube account, it really is a generous move. 5 stars, 3 stars. If you hate it, go on Letterboxd and explain why you hate it. Those things actually help. I don't want to encourage any form of negativity, of course, but still, whatever. If that's all you've got in your heart, then let it flow.
No, look, I spent my whole life delusional thinking that, because all the filmmakers I like have made all these great films, that you have to make a film that everybody's going to like. And I remember at some point I was doing the sound design, or Sasha Soliover, who did the sound, was doing the sound design, and I was sitting with him and we were talking about it. And he said, this is going to be awesome when some people hate this film. And this was back in 2023. And I was like, what the fuck are you talking about? Like, why would someone hate it? And since then, I've come to realize that, like, it just like bombing on set. I mean, just give a reaction. If you don't like the film, that's okay. I mean, and if you hate it, it means something hit you that you hate. And if I'm hitting you respectfully through the film and not with my hands, then I'm glad to do that.
I think, and this is just a personal notion here, I think if someone really, really hates this film, it might be because they feel attacked by it, or it might be, I think specifically some podcast people are really going to have problems with this movie because they're going to see themselves in it. And I got this whole thing about podcasts, but I don't think right now is the time or the place for it, because I would much rather focus on the positivity of you and not the negativity of what I think podcasting can be, because that's a lot of what your movie is. And as I said, I'll poorly explain the plot. Sydney is about a man named Jeremy who's very determined to make it. Maybe just not a podcast, but to make it in general in this very difficult world of fame. And he will do anything at any cost to get that vision out. And that isn't what IMDb says, and that's not the description that you've written for it, but in my own perception of the film, I see something, I don't know, I hate using just buzzwords, like you've got a lot of integrity, you've got a lot of talent and skill. Those things are all obvious within the first few minutes of the movie. And as you were just discussing of setting this tone on set, I think what is really mesmerizing about this film specifically is the emotion that carries with it. And you, as an audience member, watching Sydney go through just about every range of emotion. I felt anger, despair, sadness, disgust. I felt detached at different points. I was confused. I think I already said that. And that is completely you manipulating us and manipulating something. I mean, you think it's very easy to make a movie. You just get a camera and some people together and you shoot a scene and you can edit it and post. Now there are AI tools that can fix all sorts of things. But the emotion and the tone that you set with your fellow actors as an acting talent and the director of the film, it's, oh gosh, there's a film called Possession with Isabella Adjani, Sam Neill. That movie leaves you so emotionally disturbed, I feel, by the end of it. And I had such a sense of kinship with Sydney and that feeling, but they're not one and the same. And I do think it's a poor art to compare anyone's movie. Like, your movie made me think of this. Like, it didn't give me any relation to that, but there's, to paint a picture for the audience, this feeling of just immaculate loneliness and possession. And you alone captured that. Your fellow actors have a very poignant point in the film Sydney of relaying the story to us, but you alone brought something to the table that I think is just mesmerizing. Did you go to school? Did you take acting classes? Or is this just, as you have been discussing, You love this art, you love comedy, you have a lot of admiration for a lot of talented people. Are you self-taught?
Technically, I've acted in 3 films, but I would say 2. I acted in Sydney, and I acted in my senior thesis at the University of Michigan in this film called George O'Duncan. And I'm gonna explain what George O'Duncan is just because I think it gives you an idea of who I am or where I was. George O'Duncan is about a guy named George O'Duncan who lives in the Avon and finds out he has a condition called coleus rompere, which means his testicles are going to explode and burst. But his family is wealthy, and the only way he can inherit the family fortune is if he has a kid. But he has 24 hours to impregnate someone. Back on Earth, the world is ending, and everyone's shooting off into space trying to save themselves. In the end, George's testicles do explode, and we realize that George O. Duncan is God in heaven, and that the earth and the moon were his testicles, and everyone on earth is just sperm. So I played George in it. I directed it. I practiced that performance like I did a stand-up set. I would just rehearse it over and over. I'd record myself. I'd do the lines for people. It was more of a memorization of repetition. And when I was kind of dating a girl at the time who was in an acting school, and she's like, "That's not how you act." And I was like, "Yeah, but that's how you do stand up, and that's what I know how to do." Sydney was completely different. Sydney was just like I knew Kevin could play this character, Kevin. I knew I was able to do this thing with Jeremy, but I mean, I took theater in high school. And no offense to the theater in high school, but I don't really think I learned anything about acting from that. I took an acting class in college, and all I did was just fool around and improvise during the sets, which the teacher thought was funny, but it wasn't like the stuff. So I did a lot of rehearsing. I mean, for Sydney, I taped myself. I would go through the entire script over and over and over. And I mean, the script, like, there's a joke in the movie that Jeremy only writes first drafts, because most of my life I would only write first drafts. But this had so many drafts. The final scene probably had 300 drafts, the final scene.
Wow.
And I didn't even use that in the end fully because the movie was changing as we were filming it. Because I was watching Callie and I was watching Kevin and their performances react to what was happening. And I was like, okay, what I originally had didn't make sense. And I have to say, a large part of my performance works because of Kevin and Callie. They gave me so much to work with. Like when we were filming, I was directing, I was producing, I was acting. It was all in one space. I never got up basically. So it felt like everything they gave me helped me act. And then in the final scene, I needed something to happen that I couldn't figure out myself, which essentially was, how can I destroy myself? I can't figure it out. So I said to Callie, we're going to just set this up and we're going to do this until you destroy me. And I felt that in the second take. I watched it. I was like, if this is going to be the end of the movie forever, I need to see it. And I was like, that's it. And so that was her knowing the script, knowing the material, knowing the character, knowing my character, knowing the journey we'd been through over the past 4 days. And what she gave me is what gave me that performance in the final scene. I credit so much of it to her. Obviously, I put in a lot of work for it, but if she didn't give me those things, I couldn't have given back.
Well, I always like to state before I make a statement, in my opinion, just for the audience and everyone else's sake, in my opinion, making a movie, being a director, it's some people could easily just say you go on set and you tell the people what to do. This is what I want the shot to look like. This is what I want you to do. And everybody goes and does that, and you meet back in the middle, and if you don't like it, you kind of recoach and go over things. But I feel the more important thing when it is the task of being a director is being a painter. And in my experience, being a painter, there's layers, and layers are what is very, very important to setting a tone, setting a mood, being able to shape and change color, and even the dictation of reciting lines. And it seems, in my opinion, that you, because of your previous experiences and passions, have been able to create these incredibly layered, very like an onion. There's so many different peels of your film. And at this point in time, I've seen Sydney 5 different times. And every time I've seen it, I've been able to look through a different angle and see the plight of a different character and feel their pain and feel their emotion, which is a compliment on your end of being able to procure these artists, but also on the note of the artists. The movie's filled completely with amazing, talented people. And one of my questions was, you kind of have answered it here and there, but I would love to talk about them just a little bit more to give them credit. Where did you find the 3 other cast members for Sydney?
I just want to quickly say, as someone who judged films for different festivals, you see that there's a lot of great talent in filmmaking, but for a lot of very low budget, micro budget films, people seem to just forget about the performance. And to me, at the end of the day, the performance is the most important part of the movie. And if everything else was going to fail, which I didn't want it to, but if everything else was going to fail, I wanted 4 great performances from Callie, Kevin, Madeline, and me. So the way I work when I make a movie is I have a script, and it's not a movie until I have a DP and a lead actor on board. So Sean Mouton, who I made The Way I See Maria with, he's an extremely talented DP in Detroit who also shot Sydney. He came on board, and I didn't think he would because Sydney was such a strange thing at the time. And then I needed someone to play Sydney, and I, having had kind of just come back from LA, I didn't really know anyone in Detroit except through Sean. So I was kind of only aware of one actress in the area, and it was Callie. Because everywhere I go, every time I meet people, every time I see something, I keep a log in the back of my head of, could I work with this person again? And so Sean was directing and DPing a music video, and I was basically security and in charge of the water because there was a lot of rain. So by security, I mean we were filming at a house in Detroit, and I sat with the equipment for 4 hours while all of them went somewhere else to film. But Callie was in the music video, and obviously music video, she's not talking. There's not dialogue, but they were filming a fight scene inside the house, and there wasn't enough room for me to go in. So I just stood outside the house and listened to the fight scene, which I knew would never be verbally heard in the movie or in the music video. And I just was like, wow, whoever this person is, she is leading this scene. She is making this scene happen. She's the one making the changes. She's the one pushing it forward. And so in the back of my head, I was like, okay, Callie, log that. And when I was making Sydney, it was first a podcast, but when it became a film, I was nervous to reach out to her because it would seem kind of crazy. I mean, we'd met for 2 seconds, but I reached out and I was like, I'm making a podcast, and would you read for it? And she agreed. I didn't think she was going to agree. And I typically know like 3 lines in if someone's good for the part. So she read it, and I was like, okay, look, I told you this is a podcast. As of yesterday, this is a feature film. I don't have a script. I'm going to be as open with you as possible, which obviously I wasn't a little bit when we came into the filming when she thought it was a comedy, and I was monstrous a bit. But that was the performance, not me. And I was like, in 2 months, you're going to hear from me. And I hope that we can talk about this again. Just trust me. And then I contacted her. This is crazy to me. I contacted her to meet up. We were supposed to meet up, and something came up in her life, and I thought that she was making it up because she didn't want to do the movie, and I was all down because I didn't know what I was going to do. And so I left the house, and I swear to God, as I was leaving the house, my mom was watching television, and Callie was on a local commercial on TV as I was walking out. So I was like, okay, this has to be, I can't, she might be, maybe, hopefully she's okay and this is real. Anyway, I ended up casting her. She said to me, is anyone else reading for this? And I was like, no, it's just, it's just you. You're going to get the part. And then with Kevin, I mean, Kevin's been my closest friend for half my life now. I met him at an NYU screenwriting program. He has a podcast called Trash Delivery. So he is, there's a certain type of person that can play versions or relative things of themselves. But to be able to do that, you have to have an awareness of yourself and be willing to do anything to what you're aware of. And Kevin is a vulnerable, open, intelligent person. And so I just knew he could do what I needed Kevin to do. And then Madeline, who's in all of what everyone calls the lynch scenes, that was also a miracle. She was an actress in Germany. And in 2019, she came to Michigan, hoping to go to LA, I think, but ending up in Michigan. And I needed someone to play a woman in this short I was making called The Way I See Maria. She had to be a blind woman that was like existing behind the screen of a movie theater while Paris, Texas played. And I was very heavily influenced by obviously David Lynch and Blue Velvet. And I was like, I want to find an Isabella Rossellini in Michigan, which is fucking ridiculous for me to want.
That sounds like a perfect name for a short film, too. The Isabella Rossellini of Michigan, or Isabella Rossellini in Michigan.
Yeah. And so, yeah, I guess I get that actually, like, I'll think about that.
Yeah, write that down. We can take a minute. Hold on, I'll write it down. I hear that David Lynch quote of "you'll want to shoot yourself the next day if you don't write it down."
Many times you forget them. And if you forget a good idea, you want to commit suicide. So you have to write them down.
If a person forgets an idea that they love, it's a horror. And it could lead to a real yearning to commit suicide.
I write them down so I don't commit suicide later, having forgotten the idea.
Yeah.
If you don't write it down, it could happen that the next day you want to blow your brains out.
I couldn't find anyone to play this role. Like, obviously, I wasn't going to find Isabella Rossellini. And so everyone was like, just post into this generic Detroit Facebook casting thing, which I didn't want to do because in the past, I genuinely didn't get responses that were helpful. But I did it, and Madeline wrote back, and she appeared on screen, and she was reading the final monologue, and she had this accent, she had this thing about her. And again, I was just like, you got it, like, this is it. And then we became friends, and I was like, I need to put her in Sydney. I don't know how, but I'm going to figure it out because I think she's just brilliant, and I just knew that she would elevate the film.
Well, it's somewhat funny. I kind of have to freeball here because a lot of my questions I wrote down you've inadvertently answered in wonderful statements that it's things that I wanted to ask in the audience to know so they get to know them regardless. But I was really having trouble with this prior to our recording. I was watching Sydney right before we jumped on and began doing this, and I had questions about the easiest way, I guess, to call them the Lynch scenes. And I realized by asking you and getting my ultimate, okay, this is what they mean, I don't know if that's good for the audience and people potentially watching the films. So I'm going to try and word it differently because I don't necessarily want the reasoning of why you shot these scenes, but in my interpretation, oh gosh, I don't want to spoil the movie either. Things aren't quite like they seem in Sydney, and people aren't, as in real life, who they really are. And we get these dreamlike David Lynch sequences that all are very pertinent to what is going on with the characters and what is happening with the podcast that they are recording. And just as in real life and David Lynch, dreams are very important to all of our lives, and they could be repressed traumas. There's a lot of different meanings for what dreams are. We don't need to do like a Carl Jung thing on the episode, but are those scenes reality? Well, that's a terrible question. Do the reality in which those scenes take place in matter, or is it shit?
I think I can give you an answer to something along these lines. This is a delicate part to talk about because it's like I could tell you every single detail of every single intention, but also people who haven't seen the film don't know what you're talking about. So, you're trying to skirt around the details to give respect to the film, and I'm trying to figure, you want me to answer something. I have an answer for
but
what
it's
you're
also
saying.
nice. I mean, I think the mystery needs to speak for itself, because it's not like anything's confusing. You've laid out things very clearly, but there are these scenes that take place outside of our setting, and those are, I guess, what I wonder about. And the reality of those scenes is whether if they're linear or memory, or if they ever really happened, because we learned throughout this film that some things didn't happen the way they really happened. It's the way someone chose to remember them.
I think this starts out from what the genesis of the film was, which was I started by wanting to write a fan fiction scripted Seinfeld podcast. And respect to anyone who does that, but one day in, I was like, I think anyone can do this. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to do a podcast centered around me and Kevin and this made-up girl, Sydney. So I started this scripted podcast, and I wrote probably 300 pages of it, dialogue in a week. And I was like, this is what I'm going to do. I can't make a film anymore. I've quit filmmaking. I'll never make a film again. I'll just make a podcast. And I have this friend who actually was the DP of George O'Duncan. His name is Alexander Kang. He lives in Shanghai right now. And we Skype all the time talking about movies. And I sent him the podcast scripts, and he said that these are basically shit, because he's very honest. And I was like, no, I promise you they're not shit. Let me read them to you. So I had a bunch of different episodes, but I had one that I knew he would approve of that I was going to read. And it was called Sydney's Lost Highway. I had just seen Lost Highway in theaters with Kevin like the week before, the 4K restoration. And for whatever reason, even though I've seen that scene before, that movie before, it just like hit me. And I was like, what if I just wrote this crazy thing? And so I read it to Alex, and he's like, yeah, what the hell is wrong with you? You're a filmmaker. Why do you keep saying you're never making a movie again? Make a fucking movie. So I was like, but I just wrote these 300 pages and I don't want to waste them. And I was like, okay, what if I just make a movie centered around a podcast recording, and I can take some of these scenes and just put them in there, and sometimes we'll cut to them and sometimes we won't. And we were like, great. And then Alex was like, but for the Sydney's Lost Highway, don't tell anyone when it's going to come. The other ones you can give indication, but that one, just go. So again, like with bombing and comedy, Sydney started it out as me and Alex just wanting to fuck with the audience. I just truthfully. And then, so those scenes though grew over time, because we filmed all the podcast stuff in December, and then we had an empty hole where this Lynch piece ended up. And Callie has a line in the movie that I had to change to ensure that if we couldn't do Lynch, we could do anything. What are these scenes in the movie? These scenes in the movie are the answer to everything that's happening in the movie if you want to spend the time to be Freud and Jung and dissect it. But they're not dreams to me, but they can be dreams, and they can be whatever really you want them to be. But the idea was, I'm not going to be Lynchian. I'm going to have me as Jeremy play a guy named Jeremy, try to do Lynch. It's like, which is insane. I think a lot of people thought I was crazy. You didn't know what I was talking about. Some people who might see the movie before they understand what's happening might go, why is there a red room from Twin Peaks in here? So I just felt like it would be, I don't know, it took me 2 months to get that room. It took forever. I mean, to get that in order and build it and light it and sort it out. I mean, I guess I can't really answer why it's there, because I don't think it's up for me to know why it's there. It's up for the viewer to decide, because I've heard a lot of different interpretations, and if someone really wants to corner me, I'll break it down for them. I'm not going to be like Lynch and I'm sad he died, but I think it's incredible he got to die without ever seemingly telling anyone how the baby in Eraserhead was made. I mean, the fact that he got all the way through. I mean, now it's just in a mystery forever. Even though some people might have ideas, I mean, I'm a little more open than that, but I think I would rather have a few more people see the film before I dissect what they are. All I can say is I wanted to do lynch cues like the red room, like the ear, like Dennis Hopper's, Frank's mask, like the closet, like the road, obviously. Like it's just I wanted to just say just how Jeremy tries to do Seinfeld and fails. I wanted to show Jeremy trying to do Lynch and failing. I was talking to someone at some point, they said they never see the failed work of artists. And Sydney is about an artist who's failed in his failed work. So I guess it's to respect to everyone out there and to try, no matter how it ends up.
It's something, and I don't know if this comes off as an insult or not, but for one reason I particularly tried to word that question the way I did is because I didn't want to grill you as an artist just in case you did have that David Lynch opinion of I'm not going to tell you things, but that thankfully my mumbo jumbo got the because that was a brilliant answer, and I think it's tremendous, but I don't think specifically any, like, and this is a term I really hate. I hate Cronenbergian, I hate body horror, I hate the term Lynchian. I don't feel Sydney is specifically Lynchian, and what makes, not to try and give too much away, but there are scenes in this movie that you start getting enraged at you, the filmmaker. And when you first are watching a movie, you don't know anyone's name, you don't know what they look like, so I wasn't paying the closest attention. I didn't see Jeremy Berkowitz playing Jeremy. I saw the name Jeremy Berkowitz was the director, and I just assumed there was this actor, and I became enraged at this faceless person throughout the film, and there were moments where it's like, this guy, this clown shoes motherfucker, who does he think he is? And then that's put back into your face so quickly and just as sharply as it was given to you that when people apply these terms, it's Lynchian. Or as I said earlier, I don't like when critics or journalists, whatever, armchair critics, even podcasters, and I don't mean to say any of these terms insultingly to people, when they go, well, this movie really is just like this movie. Well, then why the fuck did you waste all of our time to write this article or to say this thing if you're just going to call it another film? And I think the term Lynchian really, at its base, is kind of a cop-out because you don't understand, or you're just trying to say it's a vibe. Your film has its own feeling, like it's a Jeremy Berkowitz thing. You might not know who that person is yet, but you have created a very established feeling, and I don't feel at any point like, oh, an homage is an homage, and there's a lot of artists that have made careers in life out of creating homages, and what you manipulated and created was obviously Lynchian, but in its own, it was Jeremy Berkowitz. It was your complete interpretation of these things, but the point that they serve within the film is just... It might be the best thing about it because it tilts you completely upside down and your expectations change, and you suddenly start realizing you are not in a safe place, that you're not watching a movie about three people recording a podcast, that there is so many more layered emotions, and I feel you've manipulated that just beautifully. I gotta find a question here, but
well, I just want to say it was important to me that Jeremy gets put down by the other characters in the movie because I want people to know that I don't think I'm this great thing. Like, it was really great when we were building the Red Room. I had Pat Bird as the production designer come on to help me figure it out. And we were like, should we do the exact chevron floor from the Red Room? How could we afford it? How could we afford it? How could we do it? How would it be safe for the actors to walk on? And then we were looking up carpets, and I'm literally the carpet, because one of them is in my apartment, is sitting at my feet right now. But we had these carpets, and they had a chevron pattern, but it wasn't at all really like the floor. And we were like, we could line these up. And I work with this great guy, Esther Amelian, who's a visual effects person and an animator. He animated and co-directed my short Timmy and the Dream Killers. And he was like, I can make these lines perfect in post if you want. But Pat, I'm going to really mess up what he said. But the idea of it was that sometimes it's okay to show the seams. Sometimes it's okay to, like, if it's imperfect, let people know that it's imperfect. So we laid down the carpets so they fit, but also so they didn't fit. In a way, hoping that people who were watching it were like, these curtains are great. It's lit well. There's like Lynchian things, I guess, but what the fuck is with the carpet? Because that's like the indicator of, like, they say Jeremy's not smart. They say Jeremy's not funny. They say Jeremy is crazy. All these, they just keep it like, I want people to know that I know, and it's not just me doing it. I'm fully aware of all of the actions taken to create each thing, and the level at which they work or don't work is fully intentional. And I guess the carpet is the best way for me to say, is the best visual representation of that.
Well, it's poignant that the scene is called Sydney's Lost Highway, and it begins with one of the very few times we are not in the podcasting location, and they're leaving, they're exiting, and it's not over. That Sydney is tired of all of this. But that scene transitions with Sydney obviously upset and yelling at them, and you can only imagine what she's yelling and saying, and then we move into this world, and the imperfections of Jeremy are very much present in this world, as you've just said with the carpet, and I think that is kind of transient. I think it is very imperative things for the viewer to notice, that these imperfections are present throughout the entire movie within the behavior of the lead character, Jeremy. And again, that just comes back to you choosing these wonderful moments to share and let the audience see, very similar to a painting, that there are places that you would highlight or show deeper description of what you're doing with. And when it comes to painting, it would just be where a highlighted area is. And I think these are moments that really shine throughout the film, but the entire thing, as it continues, each scene complements the other. And when it comes to the ending of the film, the first time I saw it, I was a little shocked. I don't think I quite understood it. And then the second time I saw it, I went, well, maybe I get this. And very similar to the experience people have with David Lynch, and it's not just David Lynch, you can do it with David Cronenberg, you could do it with Fellini, Pasolini. There are so many deeply talented directors that films have different angles for. But something that's really unique with Sydney is that you can take the experience multiple times with different characters and feel their plight and their emotion. And you've stated throughout some of this interview, a lot of it are personal things that have happened to you and stories that you've reflected upon. But how did you create these characters to be so dynamic? Because they seem individually like people I know, and it's people yes, but you have created the persona, the visage that they are playing in film wonderfully, and the dialogue flows as if all of you have known each other as you tell the story in the film. Like, there's such a great sense of realism. Crafting that just seems almost impossible. What angle did you, it's not even so much an angle, how did you create these characters?
It took a long time because Jeremy wasn't exactly who he was at the beginning. He was a lot calmer. And I mean, Kevin is, man, I need to think about this. I don't know how I crafted the characters. I don't know if I can answer that, but I can say that the conversations worked, at least in my opinion, because Callie truly is a professional. Kevin is one of the friendliest people you'll ever meet. He's one of the best listeners you'll ever meet. And if you listen to every cliche thing on acting is reacting and listening. And Kevin is a brilliant listener. And also, by me creating myself as an alien of sorts, it allowed them to bond, which was part of the reason why on set I thought they hated me, is because they were getting really close on set while I was just like sitting in between takes, trying to become the director, becoming the producer, fixing that stuff, becoming that, getting back into this character, like moving back and forth. And while I was fluctuating between these three things, they got time to realize that they were just good people who got along. And I felt they would get along. And I mean, one of my favorite scenes to film, as honestly, there's a film where I leave to go get sandwiches, and it's just Kevin talking to Sydney, and basically watching just Kevin and the character of Kevin and the character of Sydney interact was just beautiful to me. I don't know if it was because I got to just sit as director, but I was just crying the whole take because I just felt like however it ends up in that moment, it's two people truly connecting. It's like you've been through all of the insanity that I've been driving them through, and now you get to see, oh, there's two good people here. So it seems. I'm a big fan of Joel Petrakis, who is a Michigan filmmaker. Sasha Slogar is his sound guy. I had not seen Buzzard before before I made Sydney, just as I had not seen Inland Empire or any of Twin Peaks before I made Sydney, but we can get to that later. So I didn't know there was a huge spaghetti eating scene in Buzzard, which if you haven't seen Buzzard, you should go see it. It's incredible. But I knew that when I was writing the script, there was so much fucking dialogue that there needed to be some moment of like not talking. And so I knew that I knew that if they weren't going to eat the sandwiches, Jeremy was the kind of guy that was going to eat everyone's sandwich just to be an asshole. It was crazy because I think I said before, I kind of made the set an open forum to a certain extent. And for whatever reason, the sandwich scene, I felt like 10 people were yelling at me at the same time how to eat the sandwich. But the thing is, Kevin and Sean both know that I'm like a crazy fast, crazy eater. I'm one of those people that you sit down with a plate of food, and by the time you're done with your first bite, I'm probably almost done with my food. So they were like, just eat how you eat. But it was weird. The hardest time I had doing anything was eating the sandwich. So the first take, we started on Kevin, we went to Callie, we went to Jeremy, then back to Callie. We just kept panning back and forth, and it didn't work. And Everett, Sean, and Kevin were yelling at me that that's not how I eat. And I was like, oh my God, I should not have turned this fucking set into an open forum. I'm going to blow my brains out. This is insanity. But I knew that if I like opened it up and then shut it down, the trust would be lost. So I just had to like let it happen. But in all the insanity of the sandwich yelling, Santi, our first AD, said something about the Nathan hot dog guy dipping in the water. So yeah, we just did one more take where we went Kevin to Callie to me. We sat on me, kept Kelly in the background so she could react. And I just ate two sandwiches how I probably normally eat.
The dipping really is the key to it, because in these moments, in that little shot, just in the corner of Callie kind of attempting to eat while also like viscerally disgusted by what's going on, again coming from these Lynch-like scenes, we set a tone, and then going into more things like that, the reality is skewed, and it's something that I think is perfect about the whole movie. I mean, that's a crazy thing to say, that any piece of art or any production is perfect, and I don't think Sydney or anything really could be perfect, but that scene is truly just the way it's constructed, the open forum, everyone's hands being on it. It really is a perfect scene. You can't apply it into anything else but the situation it's in, but it works so just beautifully, and the sound design is what kills it. That you can hear the sloshing, you can hear the crunching, you're a part of it. And that is, you'd said earlier about being a film judge, one of the most important things are the actors, and I completely agree with you. And as a former film judge, I think a slight caveat on that is the sound design.
Oh, I probably should have said that. I'm fucking up. Sound is like everything to me.
Yeah, and that's obvious. It's really good, dude. It's really fucking good. You cared a lot about it. And that's one thing that hit me. You will spend hours editing something and you'll get this perfect sound design, and then you go listen to it on your TV, or you go listen to it in your car, and you go listen to it another place, and the entire sound design is corrupt and lost, and it only really works with like headphones or something on. And I have played Sydney on a TV and blasted it. I've put it on a phone. I'm sorry, David Lynch. I've blasted it. And your sound design has no corruption. That when you get that whooshing and you need it, it is there. When you need those crunches and there's just this moist guttural sound like a monster is eating a human being, and it's perfect. It is so wonderful. And that, I don't have a fucking question, I'm sorry, but that is just, it's so amazing and such a reward and a gift for me as a viewer to be able to, and a nerd especially, to feel that sound design, that it's not just present if you have good headphones. Your sound design is present fully. Unfortunately, you can't expect the home viewer who might watch it on their iPhone to be able to play it loud, like Driller Killer, Abel Ferrara, that the beginning of that movie says this film should be played loud. But it's apple or oranges, and I didn't have a question, but it is something I feel interesting for the audience to take acknowledgement too, and especially with the film Sydney. But many of your favorite films, and we'll just use David Lynch, you could watch the whole movie without even seeing it and just by listening to it. And I think Sydney is a very similar thing, that you don't need to see a single scene of this film. And you designed that. You created it that way. And by no means do I mean you should watch the movie without watching it. Please put your phones down. Everyone, watch it normally. But that's a beautiful thing. I went off on a tangent and interrupted you, but your sound design fucking rules, man.
Well, I just want to say, and Sasha, if you're hearing this and I'm wrong, I will correct it. But I'm pretty sure for the chewing, he said he used just my chewing, which I was very proud of.
Oh wow, like a lav? That's great, because it's so heavy on that sound design, and then everything else kind of diminishes, and it's like in a movie, somebody will hear a gunshot and you get that high-pitched whine and then the silence. You start realizing that there is a design for the rest of the scene, but you don't hear it. You're only stuck with Jeremy. And that happens very often throughout the movie, especially in dialogue scenes, that you tend to focus on him. And as the story progresses, it's mostly in amazement of just like, wow. Wow.
Whether it gets in or not, I just need to say that for the sound, when we were recording the podcast room, we recorded it. This guy, John Katana, has basically a recording studio he built, and we filmed it there. And that I had a friend who did a lot of sound on like all of my early shorts named Nicholas Schoonover. And it was my mission to have him record sound on my first feature because he is fucking incredible. And we have like a communication where after every take, I told him if he missed a word, tell me, and if we need to re-record it, like, which is not something most people let sound recordists do on a set or mixers, because I was like, I want to get every word at some point everywhere, so we don't have to ADR anything. So he was incredible. But then when I knew I needed to get everything done in post, I wanted Sasha Slogar, again, who works with Joel, because I have seen the shorts he's done. He's done stuff with this filmmaker, Jackson Zinga, and he is just fucking incredible. And when I reached out to him, I was just praying to fucking God that he would do the post sound, the sound design, the re-recording, mixing, everything, because I truly believed there was no one else who could do it. And I think that it took time for me to communicate what it was the sound should be and him to figure out, because I made these like weird tracks as like samples for areas to put in, but like the sound design is him, and he is the reason it sounds how it sounds. So like I'm like, I wanted to watch over it. I wanted things there. There were areas where I needed things like the French Kid story. There needed to be sound. There needed to be sound when they're talking about Death of a Salesman, obviously sound and all the Lynch stuff. But like that's him. Like he deserves so much credit for, if you're saying it sounds good everywhere, that's him.
The entirety of the film. That was one of the, we've briefly discussed film judges, so you've done it, I've done it. There's a lot of stuff that you have to look for. And the lower, I don't think a lot of audience members and people out there that just watch movies can appreciate things. Like there's and I don't mean any insult to the specific show because there's several that does it, but there's a few podcasts that have segments that are called things like Tubi Trash. And, you know, I am in a couple Tubi movies. I've got friends that have tons of films on Tubi's. It's kind of insulting. It's a little annoying that you just view this whole network as they just put out trash. And these independent films, they are put together with the smallest means necessary. You go watch Oppenheimer, all of these people are lifelong professionals and they are networked together. It's very easy to get amazing things done when you have millions and millions of dollars. And when you make these films and things that people call Tubi productions and kind of slight, they're not judged on the same par. And you can't look at John Cassavetes' indie movie from 1971 the same way you look at something like Sydney, or the same way that you would look at a Hal Hartley movie from the 90s. All these things have different budgets. You can't go, oh, it's an indie movie and compare it to fucking Clerks. They're not the same thing. Or Taxi Driver. That's a completely different type of indie movie from a different type of era. You, as the sole kind of creator behind this, are the one that, credit due to the geniuses and the artists that worked with it, but you made the network of these people, which allowed everyone to come together and equally create this art, which is something I think is really unique on Sydney and you as an artist, that most people really want their credit. Like, thank you, I made this movie, I did it, and you have extended such empathy and love to everyone that's worked on it. And for me, that makes the movie a lot more powerful, because it makes Sydney more than just one man's vision and piece of art, that all of you that were involved in this movie came together and created just something. I think that speaks very, very loudly, and it has many different avenues of speaking. I think this movie can affect you and can approach you mentally in a lot of different states, and it could be negative. I think a lot of people out there might hate this because they see pieces of themselves in it, and I obviously did. I saw a lot of relation to all three of the characters, and of course I loved the dream scenes, but you and all of this team of artists, you guys created like a living, breathing, wonderful thing.
I appreciate that. And I also want to say a few things on all of that as well. So I think it's very frustrating, the attacks that films get, obviously. I think the internet has cultivated, obviously, an unhealthy environment for many things. But for me, the reason Sydney is the scale it is the size it is because I've always said for years, I was like, if I'm gonna make a feature and I have no money, it's gotta pretty much be one room, just people talking. I've just always believed that. So I believe that if you have a very low budget, you're better off maximizing the budget and not maximizing your idea. It's better to get everything you can as opposed to spreading yourself thin for a dream. If you want a dream, go for it. But I think if you keep going in a place that you can hit at, and you hit at, and you hit at, you have a better chance of fulfilling the pure dream eventually. And so that's why I wanted it to be one room. And then in regards to, me talking about how much everyone else did, I love auteur theory. I think, Kubrick, Bergman, Buñuel, whatever, you want to go on and on and on. I love the theory of it, and I thought, like, when I was younger, I was going to be one of those guys, but collaboration is the most important thing to me. I want everyone who works on the film to feel that they are a part of it, they've given it something, and that they've taken something from it. Like, people are so focused about creating to put it out. I don't know if people want fame or success or money or what they want. I can't say for other people. So many people are focused on the output, but the best part is doing it, getting the fact that you get to do it. And then however it turns out, you got to do that and you learned from it and you had interactions, and it's just about growing and better understanding yourself. I mean, I don't think I'm going to get into full details, but Sydney changed my entire life. Like, the film's not even out there really that much. It's on YouTube for now, but it's out there. But the making of it, the process of doing it, editing and watching myself, a version of myself, changed who I am, changed how I see things. I am a completely different person in a completely different place just because of the act of creation. So I made this thing on YouTube that was about like making a podcast film. You don't need to make a podcast film if you want. I'm just saying I encourage anyone to make something, no matter how small the scale is, because the act of creating is I don't know the word. The act of creating can change you, and that's more valuable than anything.
It's the act of doing so, I think, that causes an evolution, and I've found that even true when it comes to something as simple, and by no means do I mean to compare podcasting to the art of making movies, but on this show alone, I've gone and created some things that I would consider a bit different, and as you're going through that process, you are birthing these ideas, and they exist. They might not be living in our world, but these ideas you create, they exist, and you follow through with them, and you nurture them, and they grow as invisible humans, these entities, but they have existed within your mind, and you can bring them, especially with filmmaking and arts like painting and music, you can bring these ideas and these things to life, and that process of doing so is, I feel, the ultimately most rewarding thing that anyone can do, and it's often taken for advantage. You have Netflix, you have Amazon, you have Tubi, and you run through these films and you watch these movies, and it's like, especially at the movie theater, I always scour and judge the people that get up and they leave during the credits, because I'm one of those names. I'm one of those fucking guys that held a wire and did one stupid thing. So many of those people are integral to the creation process, and especially, like, not anyone really does what you do, and you let this open forum happen, and you can't say for every independent filmmaker or underground artist out there that wants to make a film, hey, do this, but for you and what you created, it worked, and that environment was something that was positive. And I feel the whole idea of creating and people coming together, it sounds like some hippie shit, but it harvests positivity. And when you have yourself surrounded by such positivity and these creators and these art types, how can you not finish it? How can you not succeed? Because you're just floating on that. And I think Sydney is a true statement of positivity and that positive mental attitude of all these people coming together with like-minded ideas. And every single person from the PA down had a hand in making something that, whether you like it or not, is reflective of not just our time, but podcasting isn't, I think, going to be some lost art. I think it's affected culture enough that what you've created is a fairly deep statement. And there's a lot of films about famous podcasters doing whatever. Halloween, the David Gordon Green remake, is all, well, prequel, remake, whatever the fuck it's called, I don't care. It's about a podcaster, the very first one, that it seeped into our culture. One of the Ghostbusters movies, there's just a character named Podcast. Like, it's such a reflective part, and we don't really see a negative aspect of it. Everybody has a podcast. I've had one for 15 years, whether I like it or not, and it's become, I don't know, there's like 1 billion podcasts, but only a couple 100,000 of them are actually active. And there's no, I don't want to say censorship, but you can do anything and you can say anything. And most people choose to never censor themselves and to just fill the world with hate and negativity. And you're creating something, and this isn't about whether a podcast is or isn't art, but you're, in my opinion, not creating art. You, in the most part, are delivering and pushing hate for no reason out onto the world. And I think something really immaculate was captured in Sydney of not saying podcasting is incessantly like parasitical or evil, but there is an anti-appreciation of art when all you do is rip it apart and shit on it. And I think there's a really poignant statement that is within that movie that I hope people get. I think they're going to. I think it's going, and you can't speak for everyone out there, but it's like, it drives you crazy that I go check the views every day just hoping for more and more and more because I want people to hear your message. Was there any research or studying, or was this kind of more of a statement that was something different that the audience, like me, as a podcaster, I took and ran with? Or did you have a mission from the beginning with a statement? I ask questions fucking terribly, don't
No,
I?
I have an answer. I'm figuring out what the best way to say it is, or if I should say it. Art is interesting because, especially this film, it can change over time. I didn't know that Sydney was a commentary on podcasters or podcasting until we had the cast, crew, family, friend screening. I had no intention of commenting on podcasting. I just wanted my friend was like, "There's all this stuff about power dynamics and Hollywood and working and entertainment." I was like, "I didn't mean for any of that." Honestly, when I make things, there are a lot of people who are like, "I start with a theme and then I break it down from there." I just kind of I write a lot. Like, I've written, like this is just to explain. I don't want it to sound like I'm trying to, like, brag anyway, just for context. Like, I've written 10 features in the past year and a half. I'm constantly creating, and most of my stuff gets thrown away and never looked at by anyone. So when I'm making something, there really is no intention outside of expression of whatever it is I'm in the moment that ends up from the world around me to my brain, through my stuff, to my fingers, to the keys, to the computer screen. There was all I wanted to do was show how I felt and how people felt and how I once felt. And then all this other stuff happened that wasn't intentional. But so I hope I'm not upsetting podcasters by the portrayal. That's not the intention. The intention is just to show that people are complex and that hiding your own truth from yourself and others can be dangerous to yourself and others. And it's best to take a chance and look into yourself and see what's there and figure it out, because you'll have probably a happier, better life. And happiness is an emotion that passes and not something that's constant. So you will have a life that's easier to walk through. That's all I'm trying to do. But I'm glad that it reflects on other things. It just was not the intention.
Yeah, by no means do I think it's attacking or some ultimate statement on podcasting, but it is something that has become such a weird phenomena in our culture that, like me, I've had this show for 15 years, but I have a friend whose kid has a show and they're 17 and they get like 20,000 downloads a month. By no means do we get things like that here on Death by DVD, but next month they'll quit it and they'll move on. It's not some career choice. It's not, but it has become and such an influence in our life that it has become a career choice. People watch the Joe Rogan show and go, I'm going to do a podcast. And it's 3 people in this room and there is no, I don't know, everything's become such a massive echo chamber of itself. There is no real reflection on it. Nobody ever wants to say your show sucks or your friend's show sucks, or, like, in my opinion, I'm not the biggest fan of Death by DVD in general, but yet we still manage to exist and something comes along the way. There isn't often any statements beyond, well, podcast exists. And I think in its own that there is a really deep reflection of society's obsession with having to have some nonstop entertainment, that people don't really look at art anymore as it's art. It's something to dissect. It's something to consume and to rip apart, and people don't have any appreciation of it. I think there's a lot of layers throughout this film that show different people's appreciation for art, from Jeremy's to Sydney, and what is happening with these people. Which, it's ironic the movie's called Sydney, because I think it's more about Jeremy, but Sydney's definitely a way better title than Jeremy.
I just want to say that maybe a good explanation for how Sydney relates to podcasts before I get to the title is I had dinner with some friends before I shot the podcast scenes. They said, "What is the title of the podcast in the movie?" And I was like, "What are you talking about?" They were like, "Every podcast has a title. What is the title of the one they're recording?" And I said, "But the movie's not about a podcast. What are you talking about?" And that probably makes no sense, but that's the best way I can explain how it connects to podcasts. Anyway, though, the title, I think I had 2 titles. The first title was called A Face in a Room, which I got rid of because I think there's like an Elia Kazan movie with a similar title. But the reason that it was called A Face in a Room is because when I was talking about Alex Kane and we knew we were just going to basically show people talking in a room in a way, I was saying like a lot of filmmakers, they visualize shots in their head, and I can't see shots. I can just see people in a room. And we quickly got rid of that. And then Sydney's name was Sydney, and I'm a big Paul Thomas Anderson fan. And I knew that Hard 8 was supposed to be called Sydney. That's what PTA wanted, and he didn't get it. And so in my mind, I was just like, to honor this guy, even if he never sees the film, I'm going to call Sydney because it's my first feature.
So you are doing this podcast. Like, how did you?
Hey, I was just thinking, I got the sandwiches and it's been kind of a long day. So if we want to take a little break to eat them, we can, or we can do the other podcast next and then eat it. It's whatever you guys want to do.
No, I'd rather just be done as soon as possible, especially because you're just through this scene at us.
Well, once you see the sandwich, you're probably going to want to eat it. It's a good place.
Oh, sandwich. One step above pizza.
You said you're okay with sandwiches. I thought we talked about that at some point.
I'm just fucking with you, dude. Relax. God damn it. This is the first time I've been in a relationship for years. Becky likes to have sex twice a day, once in the morning and once at night. How am I supposed to keep that pace up?
No.
What?
This is terrible.
It's okay.
The concept is stupid. The dialogue is stupid. The title, Jeremy, the title is stupid.
The title's clearly a reference.
I know what it's clearly a reference to, Kevin. That doesn't make it better. If anything, it makes it way worse.
Sydney, I think that you're forgetting that you love David Lynch.
Lynch is incredible.
But it also works to not set your expectations forward, because you see the title Sydney and you don't know what to expect. You go on this adventure and you get a very simple idea. It's a movie about podcasting, and most little blurbs about what you can find on IMDb, it's just a little sentence. A podcaster makes things as difficult as he can for his companions while recording a podcast. And you start the movie, you don't really know what you're expecting. That I certainly thought that with the description, it was going to maybe be more of a comedy-based thing about people recording this podcast. And slowly, as it gets more unfiltered and the movie moves forward, I think you truly get lost in the spectrum of these characters, because you don't know really who you're rooting for or who is your avatar throughout this film. And once that becomes present, I think it's just a very rewarding piece for the audience. Was there any in the script or any point of that to direct you to a character or someone to have hope for, or was it just more about the statement?
Yeah, there was definitely. So the framing of the room of the podcaster release is Jeremy is on the left, Sydney is in the middle, and Kevin is on the right. And Sean and I talked about it a lot, how because we wanted a lot of freedom in the room, we were going to light from the top down, and we wanted me and Kevin to be in profile. So there's some. It's like it's an interesting choice to keep a character mostly in profile for a movie, and then to just have her center stage with the light right on her. Is people have asked me, like, why is she in the spotlight? And I'm like, well, it's called Sydney. She's Sydney. You should be focusing on her. It's like I wanted to put all the focus on Sydney, who Sydney is.
It's very much like a play also, where you would have that spotlight really directing you, even in those back seats, as to who this lead.
I say this to people a lot. I think the movie, you could look at it as a play with a short film in the middle. The way it's even filmed is like you're in the audience and you're looking up and you're looking back at them talking. Sometimes you focus on someone, but you're mostly just watching. And then even that's kind of like the Red Room is like, that's people on a stage. Like the whole thing is, I like to film. I know there's a great dolly shot, there's the car shot, all that stuff, but I really like just filming on what do people say, on sticks, just on the tripod. Just I like to be set on a tripod. I don't know why, but yeah, I think the film is kind of like a play. Even she's in this almost at the beginning. It's almost like she's in the like her room waiting to come out, like she's getting called out from the backstage. There's, the curtain, then there's the curtain at the end. It's supposed to be framed like a play almost.
Yeah, the final scene really to me was like the exeunt omnes. Everybody leaves the stage. We get this drop, and then the music begins to float in. And I think that something important too is you have music at the beginning of the film and music at the end of the film, and they're both telling pieces lyrically of what is perhaps an ideology or a thought somebody in the film is having. And that's my personal interpretation, is when I look up the lyrics from the beginning of the film and when I listen to the end of the film, I think that there's a contrast between where we've started, obviously, and where we've ended. But we've met in the middle so much, as so much emotion has flown from both points. I don't know, there's just, it's not a question again. It's I was just kind of amazed. And it's even crazier, you're sitting on YouTube. I'm not paying for this. A24 isn't putting this fucking thing out. And this was more enjoyable for me than most movies I saw theatrically. Like, I mean, and that's like Alien Romulus, Maxine, man. I mean, I saw a lot of movies last year in the theater, and not once did I walk away going, well, that was a powerful emotional thing. And I saw a lot of stuff that spoke to me and I thought was cool, but it just seems now I want to plead with the audience. I want to point out, if this has any importance to you, at least following me and hearing me and how much this has affected me, I really, really feel that this speaks more than just to somebody that sits behind a microphone. I think that you've created something that is ultimately reflective on society and how people treat each other. And it's just so filled with emotion, whether it could be a play. I mean, you could tour the country with it as a play, as well as it being a film. The emotion is still all there.
Comment on the music. Originally, I wanted there to be a musical score because if you look back at my shorts, they're all very heavily musically influenced. But I quickly realized with all the dialogue, it would have been extremely difficult and distracting. But I knew I wanted, once Madeline was in the film and she was like, she'll play the triplets, I was like, okay, I want Madeline to sing. I don't know why. I guess I just like German accents. I wanted her to sing. And so at first I was going to have her sing, I think it was just like Brahms' Lullaby. And she was like, no, this is like boring. Please let me sing anything else. So there was this song that she used to love. I think that her parents maybe sang her growing up, but like we just couldn't get access to it. And then finally Madeline said, what about Moosey Den, which is, I think it's like actually like a war song. I think I said to you, and I don't know if I should probably check it. I think it kind of is saying like, hey, we're going off to war. Don't know what we'll do. Maybe we'll sleep around, but when we get back, everything will be good. And I just thought it was so interesting to sing a song like that as a lullaby, but also knowing what's ahead, that it's a war song. And then the song at the end is by this band Dog and Panther. It's the guy whose house we filmed Podcast Room in. It's this band. I knew the movie was just such an intense experience for people to get through, and I knew that I needed some form of catharsis at the end. And when I heard that song, I just felt like this was the catharsis. If people were walking out of a theater, or just to hear a couple notes of it, if they turned it off, it's like relieving a little bit. It's. I feel like the song has like a breath of like, oh, we can go something new can happen.
Well, Well, too, the nature of it being a lullaby kind of lulls the audience into the whole dream-like idea. I think you are much more applicable of accepting ideas as a general audience member, not a film fan or a cinephile or anything like that, just somebody watching it, when you can have these perceptions of, well, this is all a dream. And it kind of takes you away at the end, like you've been lulled and brought back from that dream. And there's a great... It's not just transitions. I mean, there's a great transition from the beginning to the end of the film, but there is... it's like a beat that's being followed the entire time. And slowly throughout the film, it starts getting stretched out, and it becomes a little bit more rhythmic, a little bit more meditative. And then you get left with questions, but it's not like... by any means like David Lynch, where a lot of the questions are, what the fuck? What what did I just watch? A lot of people walked out of Inland Empire very upset. I don't think... I mean, it's up to you, the audience, but I don't think there's really an option of walking away from this movie without getting something. And what is really great is a lot of the things that I have perceived and I have gotten, we've discussed on this episode, are things that I wholly have perceived that weren't intentionally done or placed into the film. And that's really the beauty of art and the beauty of motion pictures in general, is everyone's open interpretation. That's the gift the audience receives at this point, is especially if something's reflective. If you're 2 hours later thinking about this movie, then, and I feel most audience members, I hope, are going to be thinking about this movie an hour or 2 hours later, I think it's triumphant. I think you truly have, and I'm no person to say something is or isn't art, but I think you've made something that is a truly significant piece of art that will continuously speak for itself. And that's the goal and the hope here, especially people listening. Please watch it. Watch the short films. Tell your friends. You know somebody that likes David Lynch movies? Well, Sydney 2025, Jeremy Berkowitz. It's on YouTube right now. It might not be forever, so I would please try and take some time to see it while it is available.
And just because I feel like I have to mention it, that it was coincidentally released the day David Lynch passed. That was not like... that was, I don't know, that just happened.
Originally, you'd planned to do it a couple days after, and I had started trying to make people aware of that, and it just was an uncanny thing. And the shame is that there's no possibility David could see it now, but I do think that, as I even said earlier, with the Lynchian statement and how people can compare things to other things, I think, if anything, you made something that was tributary toward a brilliant, great artist that obviously you respect, I respect, many other people do, but by no means does it infringe, or it's not like you made some cheap Lynch ripoff. There is something very equally beautiful about it, and, no one can speak for the guy, but I do think he would have dug it. I think... I think it is something
I've wondered.
I think it's something he would be able to digest and equally appreciate, because he famously didn't like talking about his work. And that's something that I'm reflective on recently, is who is anyone to explain what a movie is to someone else? And I think, especially with podcasting, there is a lot of almost parasitical behavior where people will hear what you say, and that becomes their opinion fully forevermore. And that is not helping art at all. That's not letting people dream on their own. And a big statement throughout this entire episode has been dreaming. And you out there, if you're listening to this, get your phone, get something, anything. You can make anything. It's ultimately up to you. The fear I completely understand, but I feel if you even watch Sydney, that you should be able to find inspiration from that. I think you've made something very inspirational.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of fear in creating, and as much as I've tried over the years, I've learned that you can't make someone create. But, like with the first thing we said, my original intention of wanting to make movies was so if someone who felt depressed and alone saw my work, maybe, I don't know if I can make them not depressed or not alone, but at least make them realize their feelings aren't just in their head. Other people feel equal confusion, equal pain, equal misunderstanding. And I just wish that, yeah, I don't know. I hope people will watch this, because the goal of Sydney if nothing else, was to get people to think about what they saw. And I think not a lot of people like to think anymore, and that's fine. But I was very happy when I first showed it to friends, and then 72 hours later, a friend who I never expected would have thought about it for a second asked me questions for like a half hour about it and had his theories about what the live sequence was. And so that was enough for me to be like, okay, this worked.
So I think we have spent some good quality time not just discussing you, but discussing the almost tribal nature of creating art and how many hands and how many people truly, not just with art, but with life in general, shape and mold and change your life. And you said something I thought was really beautiful earlier, that from beginning this film to making it and releasing this film, you are certainly not the same person, and that it doesn't matter if you've changed for the better or the worse. You have evolved, you have changed, you've become a machine that creates art, and you excel at this. You are able to manipulate emotion beautifully, and I think that's one of the most important things a director could ever do, is give the gift of feeling to someone, and you directly give that gift to the audience. Is there going to be more work that people can see, and where can they find it? We know, I've talked about this before, Sydney right now, as of at least 2025, is available to watch on YouTube. You can watch mini short films from Jeremy Berkowitz also on YouTube. But will there be a .com or a hub, a place that we can find you in the future?
JeremyBerkowitz.com.
That might be it.
SydneyTheFilm.com. Both links are attached to the YouTube page. If you watch the movie, please post something on Letterboxd, whatever it is you think, from top to bottom, good or bad, hopefully good, but share whatever you think.
Short films, too. Many of Jeremy's short films are available on that YouTube that he just mentioned, and you can review them. I know Something About Maria is available, showing up on Letterboxd. So I said this at the beginning of the show, and I'll say it again at the end, and I'll keep beating the drum over and over again. You can do things that are so simple and free to support and help independent and underground artists of all shapes and sizes, simply as not just sharing Death by DVD, sharing their work, supporting them directly doesn't always cost money. Sometimes it can be $1 or $2, but what really helps is your words, and your words are remarkable. If you cared about something, or something reached out to you, or it affected you, you don't realize that people are watching. I don't know if Christopher fucking Nolan is peeping Letterboxd reviews, but down here in the indie world, in the underground lands, we are. We're watching it. We want to hear feedback. And again, there's always negativity with positivity. And if you feel that way, at least try and be eloquent about it, and have something constructive to say, and realize that this is a gift, that people don't have money. Jeremy Berkowitz isn't some millionaire fucking trust fund kid. You're just a guy, and you're out here making your art happen. And that Christopher Bickle is just a guy. He doesn't have money behind him. He has a vision, just like Jeremy, and they're out there bringing this gift to us. If you hate it, if you don't like it, well, make your own movie. Let it inspire you. At any corner and any turn in your life, you should let the negativity inspire you and give you hope. And for me, I personally want to say you have given me nothing but inspiration and positivity, and I am so thankful deeply to Christopher Bickle for suggesting this film to me, and I am just so happy to know you. I am so happy to start a friendship with you and have you in my life, and most importantly, your art, I think, is just life-changing. I am so happy to have seen Sydney. Thank you for making it.
Thanks for supporting it. Thanks for doing this interview. Thanks for all the kind words. And yeah, glad to do a podcast sometime about a movie.
I'd love,
it's not Sydney,
for 1,000 years to have you back and to talk about everything. And anything. And again, it's just been a gift having you on the show, as your art is a gift to all of us. So I hope all of you out there in Radio Land follow through Sydney Movie. You can just type it into Google. Sydney Movie. Find it. 2025. Written, directed, starring Jeremy Berkowitz. It's not a challenge. Find it on our social media. deathbydvd.com. It's on Patreon for free. deathbydvd.com/Patreon. Watch the movie. Just take a chance. Enjoy yourself. Life is awful. We all know it is. Watch a movie and take a ride. Jeremy, thank you for taking this ride with me and joining me in the graveyard. It truly, it means a lot. It means a lot more than I can say, man. You fucking rule, and I'm so glad to know you.
Right. Great roller coaster through the graveyard. Jerry Seinfeld's first joke was about roller coaster, but I don't know it, so I'm not going to do it.
All right. Well, gosh, that's it. Thank you for listening. The ashtray is full and the bottle is empty. I am Harry Scott Sullivan, and until next time, pleasant tomorrows.
Death by DVD is recorded in front of a dead studio audience.
Portions of today's programming have been mechanically reproduced.
Death by DVD is broadcast from on top of Blue Crystal Sunshine Mountain in any town, USA, with transmitters on top of the Empire State Building.
The management and the staff wish you a pleasant good night and good morning.
Give me back my phone.